I'm going to do roll now. Mr. Harrison?
Here.
Mr. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Caulfield?
Here.
Mr. Church?
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Simon?
Here.
Mr. Vieira?
Here.
And Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Ms. Martineau and Mr. Moore are excused this evening.
Okay. We have the minutes of the February 15th meeting. I don't have any changes. Does anyone else have any changes?
Motion to accept minutes?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
And we have the resolution for the Owen property on Eagle Rock Way. Tommy sent around a revised resolution, which, since those were my changes, I don't have any other changes for members who might not have had a chance to look at it. Basically, I corrected the date of the meeting and combined the landscaping language to be all together, so troublesome attorneys like me couldn't argue that by saying slightly different things in different places, there was a different intent and whatever. So but those are the only changes. Anyone else have any other changes to that resolution?
Motion to accept the resolution?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? And that's the resolution with the changes.
With changes.
Yeah. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
And the next matter is the continuation of the public hearing for the Foroughi application at 7 Clinton Avenue. Mr. Trembulac, you want to give your appearance and proceed?
I forget.
Give it a tap. No,
Because it,
doesn't light up anymore. This one moves.
yeah, I can use this one. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Alan Tremulac appearing on behalf of the applicant, Kamran Foroughi. As you'll recall, we were here in January and essentially completed this application for setback variances for a new garage on the property. And at the conclusion of the hearing, the board had two requests for us. One was to provide a written drainage plan showing how we intended to control water coming off the new structure and ensure that it would not go onto the neighboring property but would flow onto my client's property. We have a plan that William Stimmel prepared, and he can testify in a few minutes to just explain that plan to you. It's pretty simple. And then the second request that the board had was that we consider revising the application to provide for a greater setback distance between the rear of the garage and the rear property line. So, and we are prepared to do that. I just want to explain for a minute. The 1995 survey that was admitted into evidence at the last hearing shows the old garage, which also, at that time, there was a shed that was built onto between the back of the garage and the property line. The survey prepared by Richard Hingos simply has a setback between the shed and the property line of 1 1/4 of a foot. I spoke to Mr. Hingos today, who told me that the distance between the old garage and the property line was 4.75 feet. So based upon that and the board's request that we reconsider the setback, we'd like to amend the application and request that the board allow a 4-foot setback to the rear, slightly less than the other garage, but we're just trying to add a little bit more room in the garage, which we'll have to shorten by about 2.5 feet or so. That will also result in, I think, a slight increase in the side yard setback, but the setback as already proposed, is basically the same as what existed as shown on the 1995 survey. So that's what we're going to be requesting, and as I indicated, I have Mr. Stimmel here, and I'd like him to just explain this fairly simple drainage plan for the boards, if I may call him. Okay. Stimmel.
All right, Mr. Stimmel, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
Just state your name and address.
William Stimmel, Stimmel.
Okay.
My professional address is P.O. Box 280, Rutherford, New Jersey.
Okay, Mr. Sibilia, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Trembleak, you can proceed.
Okay. Mr. Chair, we accept Mr. Stimmel as a professional engineer. Testified previously. All right, Mr. Stimmel, you prepared the drainage plan for property at 7 Clinton Avenue?
I did.
Okay. And board has copies of that. I guess we should mark that, Mike?
Yeah, I
is
think
it
we're up to A4.
A4. Okay, Mr. Stimmel, why don't you explain this plan to the board?
Sure. This is the drainage plan that was submitted to the board with the date of March 14th, 2023. It shows a survey of the existing conditions for a portion of the property with the detached garage at the rear southeast corner of the site. In order to capture the runoff from the roof of the proposed existing garage, I am proposing to put in roof leaders with 4-inch HDPE to direct the roof runoff to a 4x4 by 2 foot deep gravel pit along the rear property line. The intention of that is primarily to direct runoff away from the adjoining neighbor's lot to the south of the site, but also to infiltrate some of that runoff from the roof of the garage.
Okay. And will this plan, if implemented, assure that no runoff from the garage would protrude onto the neighbor's property?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, does that basically cover it?
That's it. It's a pretty simple plan.
Okay, nothing further.
Are there any members of the board have questions? Mr. Church?
The design of this garage that you're constructing, it has a pitch roof or a flat roof?
It's pitched.
Okay, now, with the runoff, I see the runoff drainage. I assume that's onto his property.
Correct. That pit is going to be located in the
Okay.
interior of Mr. Foroughi's property.
Okay, but next door, you're right up against his neighbor's property line, and there's a tennis court right there. Will that pitch roof, will the runoff from that pitch roof always be directed to his property, or will it drain into the adjacent property?
There will be gutters on the sides of the garage roof to catch the runoff, and then it'll run around to the gravel pit located on the site. So even though a portion of the roof is pitched toward the neighbors, it'll run off, go into the gutter, down the downspout, through the trench, and through a pipe back to this gravel pit.
So that drainage pathway is across the back into here. Is there a pitch to it to guarantee that that's going to happen, or?
Yes, there is going to be a pitch to it to guarantee that happens. There's no topography on the survey, so we don't know exactly what the contours of the property are, but it will have to be constructed in a way that it's pitched to the pit.
It's rather flat.
It is. I rendered this drawing at 8.5 inches by 14 inches. Usually I'm used to the large 24 by 36 plan sheet, so a little bit of the detail might be lost in trying to read it, but I did put directional arrows showing the route that the water follows around the perimeter of the garage. So it goes from the southbound side of the garage, it goes west across the face of the garage through an existing trench, and then back east and then to the pit. So the water will be conveyed to the pit. There's also a note, again, because of concerns with impacts to the neighbor's property, that there's not going to be any encroachment onto the adjoining lot as a result of this project. Now, Mr. Trembulac had indicated that the applicant is now proposing to shorten the garage, shift the rear of the garage.
And eliminate the eave.
Right, and eliminate the eave, so there will be no issue with the encroachment either.
Thank you.
Mr. McCulloch?
So, do I understand that this garage is already under construction, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And does that mean that the frame of the roof is also under construction?
Yes.
Is it under construction to the extent that it could not be changed?
That I wouldn't be prepared to answer, but they've stipulated that they're willing to change the location of the rear wall, so they're held to that.
The reason why I asked the question is, much like my colleague on the board here, I'm wondering if the roof design could not be tendered in a way that slants the roof entirely, so all the water runs off to the southeast. I don't know if that's the west side. I'm not sure exactly. Oh, to the east side of the garage. So all the water runs towards your actual property. None of it would be angled to go toward the neighbor.
Oh, you mean on the east side?
Yes.
Oh, there's no roof going on the east side. It's mostly south and north. If you
Oh.
talk
Well, he
about
might
east-
have the,
Yeah, the east side, there's no, the pitch is from south to north.
I see.
Yep, the peak of the roof runs perpendicular to Clinton Avenue.
So what about if it were to run to the north?
Oh, that would be on our property.
That's exactly what I'm asking.
Right.
So that the water would the runoff from the roof would all be directed to your property as opposed to,
Oh, you can explain, but the gutters on that side of the property,
Hmm.
it actually, the downspout takes it, and we had already drainage from the carport, the overhang.
Mhm.
And Mr. Foroughi, you were previously sworn, you're still under oath, correct?
Yes.
Understand.
So the water actually goes through the overhang into drainage, and the drainage takes it to the backyard.
Mhm.
And the actually neighbor's property, the pitch is higher, the lands are higher than mine. That was the issue we had, because all the water from the neighbor was going to the garage.
Hmm.
And so we had water damage, actually.
I see. Right.
Other questions from members of the board?
I have a question. Mr. Tremulak, I just want to make sure I understand what Mr. Hingo's relayed to you today. So are you saying that the existing setback from the property line on the rear of the garage is 4.75 feet, or is that,
that's
What's
what it was
proposed?
for the prior garage.
okay,
It was 4.7 feet from the rear property line to the rear of the garage building. There
So-
was also the shed in between, which is no longer there.
okay. So the setback that we see on the 1995 survey is a setback from the shed to the property line, not the garage?
Yes,
Okay.
and again, he told me verbally, because he did, at my request, he calculated the setback, because it's not shown on that 1995 survey, but he calculated it at 4 feet, 4 3/4 feet.
Okay, so the setback on Mr. Stimmel's exhibit of 1.8 is incorrect?
He's just taking from the existing survey.
Okay.
Right, without that change.
And then the new garage, the setback will remain at 4.75, or,
Well, we'd like it to be 4 feet, and I think the board has approved that in other applications, you know, I mean, I realize it's 9 inches or so, but, yeah, it's just to allow an adequately sized garage. I mean, it's still gonna be less than 20 feet, and I think 20 feet is considered pretty much a norm for a single-car garage. So,
okay.
again, we're asking for 4 feet. If the board insists on replicating the prior setback and 4.4 3/4 of a foot, obviously we have to go along with that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from members of the board?
Yeah, you kind of just answered it. So you're shortening the garage, it's showing 21 feet, and you're going down to, you said 20?
Well, it's going to be, I had the, it'll be a little bit, it'll be a little bit less than 19, because we'd have to take off a little over 2 feet to allow for 4 feet, so it's going to shorten the length of the garage to a little bit less than 19 feet.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Mr. Foroughi? Go ahead. Yes.
So, Mr. Tremblay, so then the garage in the back will be, using that 95 survey, will be .28 clear of the property line. If we move this survey here, 95. If you look at that, there's a .28 there. So if we move that up, that will make that clear of the property line, .28. Do we know?
Tommy, you had calculated this, I forget what the setback is. That's what it was on the old one, and,
It's 1.8, I think, on the new.
no, they're talking about the side.
Oh, sorry.
It's going to be less than that, I believe.
Oh, 0.28, yes.
According to Tommy's memo, the eave projects about 10 inches, which is 4 inches over the property line. All right, so we're now removing the eave entirely, which would then, math's not my strong point.
That's all right. I mean, I'm not, eaves or something, I'm not, I mean, that can be, I mean, I'm just looking at the property building to the property line. I think that 2.8 is going to be what that offset's going to be. Yeah.
You know, always was very close. It's not
We,
gonna be any
last time we
closer.
talked about this, we also talked about exploring, like, moving the garage up. Did you look at exploring that aspect of it? And the carport, talk to me about the carport. Is that like
Carport
historic or something to the building? No, did we?
It was built in the 80s.
Okay, yeah.
I think 84 or 85. It's a, they call it overhang, but I think the shed was added later in 99 or 2000 by another owner, the
Yeah.
previous owner then.
But when we last talked, we talked about maybe moving the shed up. Did you
The
look at
garage
that?
was-
Explore?
Yeah, the
moving?
garage was
Okay.
away already, I think 6 inches, I think. It was the last that we talked about. And then the idea was if we cut back 2 feet, it would be a lot more than actually previous garage. The previous garage was, I think, was 0.28 inches. It was basically.
No, you're getting the side yard and the.
The side yard, I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Not the back of the garage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do Mr. Stimmel first, because ostensibly he's the witness. So, so you're proposing the trench right up against, to go right up against the property line, from the back of the garage to right up against the property line?
The garage has a peaked roof. The peak is perpendicular to Clinton Avenue, so it pitches to, half of it pitches to the north, half of it pitches to
I
the south.
understand that.
Okay.
It's the you're proposing a stone-filled trench at the rear of the garage to hold the stormwater, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is that trench, my understanding of the dimensions you're giving is that it will go from the back of the garage right up to the property line, is that correct?
It's shown about 2 feet off the property line. It could be more than that if the board has a preference.
Okay, well, what is the 4-foot dimension that's shown?
It's a 4-foot square pit, 2 feet deep.
Okay, and
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the one, the contractor.
So
And
if it's-
that's 2 feet off the rear property line.
Well, how can it be 4 foot square if it's 2 feet off the?
The pit is next to the garage, not behind it.
Correct.
It's in the yard, the backyard.
It's in the yard. There's an area with pavers back there. It would be where some of the pavers are.
Okay, and how is the stormwater from the south side of the garage getting to the pit?
So it's going to run in a gutter along the south side of the garage, drop down, go through a existing trench that runs just in front of the footings for the garage, and then it's going to go via pipe back to the pit. The gutter along the north side of the garage is going to run to the back of the property, down a downspout, and via pipe to the pit.
No, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
It's a little bit schematic. In actual execution, it's going to require some discussion with the contractor to determine how to get the water into the pit while disturbing the least amount of the existing patio there, because the applicant has a pretty new-looking, nice patio, and we would like to disturb it as little as possible, but that's how it's going to function as a practical matter.
Still has to get pipe there.
Because I guess that's the part, I mean, given the property is basically flat back there, the run of the pipe coming from the water that's on the south side over to where the pit is,
Correct.
how is there going to be enough slope in the pipe to,
Can I interject here? We already have an existing drainage from the carport. This is an existing drainage we had, always for 20, 30, 40 years, that goes from the Clinton Avenue and also on the south side into the carport to the backyard. So we already, the plan.
The pit is already there.
Already there.
Okay.
This was been there for a long time. It's not something we're actually, I think, doing. So all the water that used to come in, even from the neighbor's property, will go to the drain in the carport, right in front of the garage door. And then, because the land has a pitch toward our property, and it will go to the backyard. So already was there, the drainage.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So you're saying there's a trench drain and
Correct,
it's
always been.
in front of the existing garage?
Right
And
across the garage.
So your leader's going to? Into the trench, and then you're going to
existing.
run another pipe underground from
It
that
is already,
trench?
the pipe is there, actually.
But the
It's always
pit that
been.
Mr. Stimmel is proposing, you're gonna run a pipe from the trench that's existing to that pit? Is that the plan?
We believe the pipe is already there.
Already there, always been.
Along the north side of the garage?
Yes.
So, but it's not reflected here in this drawing, that existing
Well,
pipe.
yeah, forgive me, but I asked Mr. Stimmel to, jump in here. He was not part of this application, and asked him to provide this plan. We had gotten a very amateurish handwritten plan from Mr. Foroughi's contractor, which I didn't think would be acceptable, so I asked Mr. Stimmel to basically take that, and he came out to the site with me also, and visually saw this, and so he wasn't fully aware that a lot of this drainage was already in place.
okay, but
Otherwise, the
Sorry.
water will go to the garage, by the way.
The contractor had shown me a small pit that he had created at the back of the property, a gravel-filled pit to accommodate some of the runoff from the roof of the garage. Essentially, what I was proposing to do was just upsize this. If there's an existing seepage pit elsewhere in the rear yard, that's not, picked up on the survey, and I didn't have any information about that.
okay, so how did you determine the size of the seepage pit? What size storm is it?
It's not designed to accommodate any particular storm. It was designed to direct the runoff from the garage roof to this pit and keep it away from the neighbor's property. It works out to be about 3/4 of an inch of water from the area of the garage roof. The number would change slightly as the garage becomes shorter, but somewhere between 3/4 and it wouldn't be more than an inch of water off of that roof. The applicant had a garage there, so I wasn't looking at it as new coverage. It wasn't lawn, it wasn't flower beds there, so that was the idea.
Right, but it's the neighbor had expressed concerns about existing runoff impacting, and I think we're trying to make that better. I guess where I'm concerned is, I mean, my understanding of what Mr. Foroughi was saying is water is going into the trench drain in front of the garage, not just from the garage, but from the carport or down the driveway. Is that correct?
There would be some, and there is also, I believe, water from the neighbor's property coming onto Mr. Foroughi's lot. I think, again, there's no topography, but I think at least in that area, the neighbor's lot is slightly higher than Mr. Foroughi's property.
Okay, any other questions from board members?
Yeah, so, excuse me. So where's the location of this pit? Because I'm looking at figure 9 from the plan, and it seems like the patio is already constructed. Is that going to be dug up?
Well, it's not under the patio, it's by, this is by the tree. I don't know if you saw the dogwood. So the patio actually is not in that section.
So it's going to be where the tree is?
It's next to the tree. It's a small tree.
But you don't plan on digging up any of the pavement that's there?
It was already there when the pavement was replaced. The pavement was replaced. They actually, they did put a new duct system because we wanted to make sure there's no blockage in there. It was just basically, yes, it's basically right around that area, if I'm correct. That's what
But it's not below the.
Those of us
I
who are
don't
on the
think so.
board have no idea what you're pointing to.
I'm so sorry.
I was showing, I apologize, I was showing him, I was directing his attention to figure 9 in the December 2022 report, which shows the rear yard with the patio, and there's a dogwood tree in the back, and
If I may, the issue with the drainage was, actually, I had more drainage issue from the neighbor than I had on them because the land is higher. So we had to correct the drainage issue, because otherwise the garage would be destroyed again. That was the issue about the drainage.
So
So for myself, in sense, like taking the water coming from the neighbor from the south side.
I understand. I'm just trying to be clear. So you're saying that ductwork was there. Is the pit already there?
Yes.
The pit is already there?
That's what the contractor
And you're
told me.
saying that you're just going to enlarge the pit?
I think if I'm correct, it was like 3 by 3, the contractor said, or something like that.
I wouldn't put a dimension on it. It
Yes.
was smaller than 4 by 4.
Right.
And I may be repeating, but how was that size determined that to be sufficient?
I didn't come in with any sort of standard that I was trying to meet. It wasn't obviously a major development. It's not over the minimum threshold for minor development. Sorry, it's not over the threshold for a major development per the municipal requirements. It doesn't come into the minor development in terms of stormwater based on the municipal requirements, so there's no standard that's directly applicable. It's really just to address a perceived drainage issue that occurred under existing conditions within the context of this application for a new garage. The plan was intended to do 2 things: to route the water away from the neighbor's property and to attempt to catch it and infiltrate some quantity of it. It works out to be about 3/4 of an inch of rain off of the entire area of the garage roof. But if that overflowed, then it would just continue downhill, so again, away from the neighbor's property, or the neighbor in question, I hear, which, the neighbor in question here, which would be the neighbor to the south. So it would, the water would have to overflow the pit and go uphill through the garage to get to the neighbor's property.
Okay. The trees that are in that corner, is that on your property or the neighbor's property?
A lot of the trees are dead, to be honest with you. They're dead trees.
Is it on your property or the neighbor's
They're
property?
not actually trees, they're more like bamboos. There are a lot of bamboos there. There's one tree that is a dead tree, which is this.
We're talking between the
on
garage and the...
south side, right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at figure 10.
Yeah, that's a dead tree there.
But
Actually,
again, is that on your property or your neighbor's
No,
property?
that's on my neighbor's. That was the reason my roof actually broke because of that reason.
So what is your plan to keep the gutters clean if you don't have control over the trees that could potentially clog it?
Well, that tree is dead, and recently the PSNG came because there's a lot of bush growing over the electricity line. And they actually, the picture doesn't show, but they cut down most of the bushes around that area. But there's no existing tree actually around that area. It's mostly on the east side, which is a lot of the, you have bamboos on the other property, on the east property. But there's no tree actually there, except the electrical pole. Sorry, Verizon pole.
Thank you.
And are those trees dead because of oversaturation? Is that?
No, the tree was dead, actually, the branch fell, actually, that's my neighbor's tree, fell on the roof. That's one of the reasons we got some drainage also. But they never end up cutting them, I don't know. But it's pretty dead.
I happen to have some photos, if the
Yes,
board
that's-
wants to see them, that clearly show these trees and clearly show that they're on the right side of the utility pole, clearly on the neighbor's property.
Okay.
If the board wants them.
And you said also that you have water problems from the neighbor's property?
Because it's about, I think, you see, some of the homes, my house is a lot older. It's actually a historic home. And what happened was, when the newer homes were built years later, they leveled the property. This is my understanding was. And my property has a pitch coming down. Their house, it's leveled, like the whole house. So I would say more than a half a foot higher. Literally, every time it rains, all the mud comes through to this side.
And will that continue to have an impact? Does it have an impact on the garage already, or?
Not now, but that was the whole idea. We had a major issue with the previous garage, which we were trying to repair. And when they started demolition, and every contractor came in, I tell you about at least 10 or 12, gave me different ideas to repair it. Everybody said, well, we have to open it, we have to see how much damage it is, and I trust what they tell me. So once they opened it, literally the walls fell, a couple of the walls fell. But we always had an issue with the water drainage because the property is much higher than set down house.
But I guess the question I'm asking is, will you continue to have a problem with
Well,
that?
what we did was, especially by carport, we were thinking about putting some drainage to take some of that water and just like a French drain kind of drainage to that, again,
To the pit?
to the pit, right, to the backyard. For the garage to be okay this time around.
The rear corner of the garage that's near the side property line, the current survey shows it as being, my understanding is showing it being a half a foot from the
Right.
property line. Not and that's with it at the rough 1.8 foot setback. Is that correct? Okay. So if you're
Yes.
moving the garage so it's maintaining the 4-foot setback, you would have slightly more than the half foot, correct?
It's probably going to be closer to a foot, which is, again, better than what previously existed.
No, but what would happen if I said that had to keep a 1-foot setback?
From the side yard?
Yes.
Well, they'd have to, reconfigure the garage to meet that.
Well,
I
I'm
don't-
actually trying to avoid that, but
Right.
I don't, but I think Mr. Stimmel's trying to
If you-
calculate, at least roughly, if I'm not
Yeah, I know,
mistaken.
it's going to be, try to do the calculations to see what.
Talking about very small distances. If you push the rear,
Oh,
push the
Mr.
rear
Trembulac,
setback of the garage to 4 feet, you'd be at about a foot based on scaling it off. About a foot on the side setback.
okay. Any other questions from members of the board? Mr. Caulfield?
So, Mr. Stimmel, that shed, and do you have the 95 survey on you at all? No. okay.
I do
But it
not.
looks like that 95 survey had the shed, but I mean, looking off
Yeah.
that survey, it doesn't look like that shed went from north to south, that it was clear the right side of the property line. But it looks like when you move when we're moving it up by 4 feet, we're just moving it up because of that shed. Is that our understanding? Like the shed was there, was incorporated, but now we're taking back the shed.
The shed's not there.
Which would bring us back to this original survey, which would make that
Well, that's what
clear
I'm trying to,
0.28.
because
We'll
we
be
have a
back to
more
that.
recent survey
Yeah.
that shows a different, a half, a quarter foot difference, and I'm not, and that's showing the garage closer to the rear property line, which should make it closer to the side yard, not further away, and that's what I don't want to gratuitously let them get closer to the side property line. I'm not trying to give them a headache either, but I'm confused by the difference in the two surveys as being the opposite of what they should be.
It's okay. He just says that this measurement of a half a foot.
I personally think that he made the wall smaller a bit to be away from the property line. So that's why it's a little bit bigger than before.
So, Mr. Stimmel,
the
so
wall
moving that up
smaller?
4 feet, you get that 1 foot
Yeah.
clear of that property line, give or take?
If I'm correct.
Roughly, but it's difficult to measure very precisely.
Other questions from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who either have questions, testimony, statements, anything you want to say about the application? This is your opportunity to do that. Okay. Mr. Trembulac, do you have anything further?
Not really, Mr. Chair. I'd just say we're, if the board approves this, it essentially allows for the garage to be reconstructed in essentially the same location that previously existed. And again, we had agreed to remove the eave, to remove any encroachment, and, we would effectively have a 4-foot setback to the rear and approximately a foot from the side, which the 1-foot setback is slightly better than what previously existed. I would also point out, for whatever it's worth, that the two adjoining properties, the neighbor to the south is a very large property. I think it's an acre and a half, or it's at least an acre. And as you can see from some of the photos, that this garage is tucked way in the rear, behind the neighbor's garage, near a tennis court. And I don't think there's any real negative impact, particularly since the prior structure was in essentially the same location. And the other property to the rear, also a large property. This is set way in the back. There's also a large row of hedges that actually provide screening. So I don't think there's any detriment, and I would hope that the board would approve the application as amended.
Okay, we'll start discussion with Mr. McCulloch.
Well, I guess I'm generally in support of the application, and given the fact that, the neighbor has not given an alternative testimony, and that a structure existed previously, I think basically they've tried to make offer the best alternative to move this project forward. So I'm generally in support.
Just ask one more question.
Sure.
Sorry. Did you share this new plan with the neighbor?
We didn't really have a plan. The drainage plan, we only got yesterday, and I was expecting that the neighbor would be here, and I was going to, show it to her, and also she'd hear the testimony, but she's obviously not here. So.
Mr. Caulfield?
Mr. Foroughi?
Yes.
If by chance a plane crashes in this, a car drives into this, it goes on fire, explodes, and you want to have this happen again, it will never happen. You'll have to move this garage in the front, but if we can get to the point of making it 1 foot clear, I'll live with that, but I don't want to see this again in that sense. Thank you.
Trust me, I would rather just fix it. I don't want to deal with this again.
Ms. Harris?
I guess I'm in favor of this application. I have to say I'm very confused with the details, and I think if we do approve it, an updated survey or at least plan showing the setbacks is submitted with any documents they submit to the building department, as well as details of the drainage, and confirmation that the drainage does exist, per the owner's testimony.
Mr. Church?
I would concur with those remarks. It's very confusing to me that, not confusing, it's just that this drainage configuration is very complicated. It's not straightforward. And I don't know how you would make it straightforward, but I'm generally in favor also, but I would like to see some, as my colleagues stated, some drawings submitted to the planning department or to wherever they go, showing how these setbacks occur. I'd be in favor of it though, because it's a difficult position to be in with this drainage. I mean, you have a property on one side that's a little higher. You have a pitched roof that's going to cause problems, I feel, even with all the apparatus that's going on the roof. I'd be in favor of it because it's just, I don't see any other solution for it.
Mr. Simon?
I'm generally in favor. I hope that it works. Your neighbor was pretty vocal and had shown that there was some damage from before. I'm assuming that the new construction will improve the situation, and you did make efforts to shorten the garage, which should improve the situation. But I'm in favor, but again, it's just a matter of being a good neighbor.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also in favor of the application. I think maybe we have to think about the conditions as far as that 1 foot. Hopefully it works. And I agree with my colleagues that the plan should reflect what's existing there and with the setbacks as well. So, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to totally break my own rules. And what is this? Is there an existing construction permit, or does a new construction permit need to be obtained because
Needs to obtain a new permit because the contractor who started to repair the garage realized it couldn't be repaired and then just went ahead and rebuilt it without getting a permit, which was obviously not right, and there was a stop work order. So, yes, there will need to be a new permit.
Okay, so I'm in favor of the application. I think moving the garage so it's keeping a 4 foot setback to the rear property line, even though that's a slightly larger encroachment, that's what it is in terms of the garage, but they're removing the shed, which was very close to the property line. So there's an overall improvement. I think this can be done without substantial impairment to the zone plan. I think with the conditions, which I'm still struggling with, which I'm babbling, why I'm babbling is, you know, if we impose the correct conditions. So, okay, so do the easiest condition that they maintain at least a 4-foot setback to the rear property line. I think the stone pit should also maintain a 4-foot setback to the property line. That the garage be angled as it currently is angled, so the southwest corner of the garage is keeping the, now, I'm again, having the problem with different surveys showing different things, but I'll go by the more current survey of 4.33 feet to the side property line, that there be no eaves on the south side of the garage, that the drainage be done as shown on the plan prepared by Mr. Stimmel and dated March 14th, 2023, and that when the applicant applies for the construction permit, that it include a detailed design of the stormwater system showing existing and proposed piping and the trench location, and a copy of that go to the planning office. So since they're going to be more familiar with what we're trying to do, to make sure and then we get to the hard one. That the southeast corner of the garage be at least 11 inches. I'm not really interested in, you know, Mr. Stimmel said it's about a foot. I'm willing to give a little leeway there. I think, you know, it probably is going to be a foot, but I want to give a little flexibility there. And the worst case scenario is you end up having the garage 4.1, 4.2 feet from the rear property line in order to keep the 11 inches. But any further discussion among board members? Okay, if not, someone want to make a motion?
Motion to approve with the conditions just stated as by the chair.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, go finish your garage.
Thank you very much.
The next application is that of Mohammed Amine Deroui. You'll have to excuse me, even though I met you, I should have asked you how to pronounce your name. For site plan conditional use variances, parking variances, and a code waiver to convert a 2-family dwelling to a 3-family dwelling on a property located at 70 Grove Street. The property is in the R3 Garden Group Zone. The property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 32, Block 3212. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-54B4 to permit a lot size of 12,203 square feet where a minimum of 15,000 square feet is required. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-54B to permit an unenclosed fire escape from the second floor. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-54B7 to permit an exterior entrance to the basement unit on the north side of the house where a common entrance to all dwelling units from the wall of the building facing the street is required. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-102 to permit 2 parking spaces that are 8 feet 9 inches where 9 feet is required, and a variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-104 to permit a driveway with a setback of 0 feet where 1 foot is required. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Tremblant,
Yes,
your
good evening.
appearance.
Good evening again. Alan Tremulak appearing on behalf of the applicant. Again, this property, this involves property at 70 Grove Street, which is located on the westerly side of Grove Street, immediately to the north of the parking lot for the post office building, which enters from a driveway immediately adjacent to this property. Property contains a very attractive, nicely maintained two-family dwelling, which the applicant would like to convert to a three-family dwelling. The zoning for the property is R3, Garden Group Zone, which provides that conversions from existing buildings to provide more than two dwelling units are permitted as conditional uses. They're permitted subject to conditions. We meet some of the conditions we do not meet, and we're therefore seeking conditional use variances, which, as this board knows, are considered D variances under the municipal land use law. Specifically, the 3 D variances are for one, the ordinance requires a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. This property is 12,200 square feet. Second, conditional use variances relates to the fire escape. We're proposing what's really a ladder, but essentially serves as a fire escape as part of the improvements. We're proposing that it not be enclosed. The ordinance requires enclosed fire escapes, so we need a variance from that. And the third conditional use variance is to allow a separate entrance to this new dwelling unit from the rear of the building. The ordinance requires that all dwelling units be accessed from a common entry in the front of the building. We're not seeking to, there is a common entry in the front of the building for the 2 existing units, and we're seeking a variance to allow a separate entry for the proposed new basement apartment. There's also a fairly minor variance for parking space dimensions. And then there's 2 additional variances that are really, or additional variance for the driveway setback, which is 0 feet, and that's an existing condition which we're not changing whatsoever. And similarly, we need a waiver for the width of the driveway, which doesn't meet the requirements, but again, it's an existing driveway that is not being changed in any way by this application. So I have 2 witnesses to present this evening. John Guadinoli, the project architect, who will discuss the plans, and then followed by Mr. Stimmel, who will provide professional planning testimony in support of the variances. So, John? Yes. Okay, Mr. John Guadinoli is my first witness.
Mr. Guadagnoli, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
State your name and address, please.
John Guadagnoli, Architect PC. Address is 224 Lorraine Avenue in Montclair.
Mr. Sibilia, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, offering Mr. Guadagnoli as an expert in the field of architecture. He's testified before the board numerous times. Accept his qualifications. Okay, thank you. John, you prepared the plans for this project, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, why don't you start? I'd like to review the site plan first, and then we can turn to the architectural drawings. So, it looks like you bought...
Yeah. I don't have a easel, but I could tape it to here. If that's okay?
However...
Yeah. Do I have to submit this as evidence? Or?
Well, just tell us what it is. I think we're going to need to mark it. No, he's got an easel, John.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. Mr. Guadagnoli submitted a sheet A1, the basement apartment plan.
Yes.
Is this a new plan that's being submitted?
Oh, no. It's simply an enlargement of this, of the site plan, so you can see it better.
Okay.
But nothing has changed.
The
Gotcha.
site plan is located on the left side.
I know, there's a lot going on in this plan. I just...
Right, which
yeah.
is why I suggested that he bring this to...
So it is both an enlargement of the right-hand side of what your plan labeled A1, and you've colored certain portions of it, is that correct?
I'm sorry.
You colored certain portions of the,
Yes, to illustrate where there's grass and where there's paving.
I'm just trying to
So you can see-
separate it from what we already have.
Right, so we're going to mark this as Exhibit A1.
Yeah, okay.
Can we see that okay? Better?
Okay. So why don't you discuss the site plan for the board?
Yes.
What's existing, what's proposed?
Okay, there's a, all right, there's a, as stated previously, there's a driveway on the, I guess, the westerly side of the property that runs from the street all the way back. And there is an existing garage that is there, that it's a two-car garage. And there's parking to the right of that. Currently, the parking is just haphazard. It's not really striped or anything. So we've created 4 9-foot wide spots in that available space. And plus, we maintain a buffer against the neighbor as required. In addition, there are these planter boxes, the 4 planter boxes along the back, which the DRC recommended we move back in order to get the cars pushed in. So we did that. And so now the car depth is over 19 feet. So that constitutes 6 parking spots, which meets the requirement for what a 3-family would require.
I mean, the 4 spaces you're showing plus the garage, two-car garage.
Two-car garage, and those are the spaces that are slightly undersized by, I think, 4 inches per car, you know.
Okay. That garage is existing, correct?
Yes, it
And
is.
is it currently used to park 2 cars?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen cars in it.
Okay,
So,
okay.
So anyway, the only really new construction entailed in this is on the easterly side of the property. There is currently a concrete stair going down to the existing basement. It's existing, and we would be constructing an enclosure of that stair. You know, because it would rain down there, obviously. So so we would constitute an enclosure and a small roof. It's about a square foot enclosure. It's just a simple shed roof. There's an illustration of it at the bottom of the page where it says elevation. You can just see new stair enclosure. It's just got a simple shed roof there. And the only other construction is a slight amendment to the parking area to allow for cars to, like a spur, so the cars could back up and then get out. And this way, they don't have to back out of the driveway, they could drive out frontwards. And that is at the easterly side of the parking area. Those are the 2 things that involve any kind of new, you know, outdoor construction. Finally, well, let me just say that we're not proposing any trees be cut down, and the property is fairly well planted. It's very lush, and so we're not proposing any new bushes or trees either. It's pretty well covered over in many areas, so that will remain unchanged. We require a covered trash enclosure, which we show just adjacent to the existing deck. You can see it on the plan, just off the driveway. And that would be, you know, just a covered 4-foot by 12-foot enclosure, made of the same material as the deck, so it would match the deck, actually. And finally, the fire escape. That is required because you need a second means of egress from the one apartment requires a second means of egress. So it's not really a fire escape. There's a roof right there at the window. All we're doing is paving over the roof, making a platform and a ladder down. It's not a fire escape in a normal sense where you have a landing and steps and a landing and steps and going down. This is just simply a little deck with a drop ladder right there.
Can you just show where that's located, you know, using the plan that is on the easel?
That is located here, right here, right there. That semicircular circle is the cage that is required around such a ladder, so people don't fall back. It's a safety thing. So that's where we have to bring that corner. So as you can see, the building itself blocks the view of it already, plus all the tall vegetation, you really wouldn't even see it. I believe that's it. Like I said, the property's pretty greened over, and the amount of impervious coverage only increases by 183 square feet. And so,
That's due to the increase in the driveway to allow for maneuvering.
yes, the DRC recommendation, so to do that, we had to increase it, and that's it.
Okay, and again, just to be clear, the only exterior change to the existing building is the enclosure over the basement stairwell.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Just a couple of other, just follow-up questions, John. On the parking spaces, just want to be clear, the 4 spaces and surface spaces, marked 3, 4, 5, and 6 on your plan, they're all 9 feet wide?
Yes,
And you're showing them as 17 and a half on the drawing, right?
yes.
Okay, but by pushing the planter boxes back, you now have an overhang. Would there be at least,
2 feet,
okay.
2 foot overhang, so it's
Okay,
19.
So those spaces would comply?
Correct,
With the ordinance, correct?
yes.
And the garage spaces, essentially don't comply because of the width?
Yes. Depth is okay, but width is a little tight.
Okay, all right. What about lighting,
Yes.
existing and proposed?
Okay. Existing lighting is just random lights like, that are like by the deck, and I think there's a light over the garage door that's existing, but what we're proposing, the 3 new lights we're proposing are on the plan. And I just want to first point out that to the west and north of the property is all post office parking, so there is no residence to disturb or to glare light into. It's just a parking lot for the post office. They're the only house in the areas to the right, which you can see on the right side of the drawing. You can see where that dwelling is. I indicated as existing house. It's on the extreme right. So the lighting is such that to light up the parking lot, we have proposing a pole along the, I guess, east side, northeast side, and that pole would have a light shining, and you can I indicate the 0.2 foot candle, I guess, photometric, outline that would light up that parking lot. And again, it's pointing in the direction away from the house towards the parking lot for the post office. The only other lights are incidental. The one is a 60-watt wall fixture, which again is on the west side of the property, so it's not even, anywhere near the house next door and out of sight of it. And the other one would be outside the door of the new proposed entrance to the basement on the east side, and I pointed out there, it says it's a 60-watt wall fixture shielded for downward lighting, so that would only be just to light up the area around the entrance to the basement apartment. Existing along the footpath on the east side, you can see those dots, and those are existing ground lighting. They light the path to the back. So if somebody has to get to their car at night, they would follow that path and get there. But those are existing.
Okay. There's a comment in the, I believe, the board engineer's report about snow removal or snow storage area. I know it's not shown on the plans, but where would snow be removed to?
There's where it says existing grass area, just next to the parking area. Between the house and the parking, there's a large area of grass that's flat, and the snow could be piled right there.
I assume that's where it's currently piled.
It's right, that's where they put it now.
Yeah,
Right.
okay. Okay. All right, I think you covered everything that I wanted you to cover on the site plan, so why don't you proceed to discuss the floor plans and the
Okay.
the elevation to the extent you need to
Okay.
discuss the elevation.
If you see the drawings before you, the one on the extreme left is the existing conditions, and it's basically a large open space. It contains an existing bathroom with a shower, and then in the back portion of the house is an existing like laundry room with steps going up to the ground floor unit. The new plan proposes to remove those steps, thus isolating the basement, and turning the laundry room into a kitchen. In doing that, we provide the elements necessary for a dwelling. And there's an existing bedroom or space in the extreme back corner that would be the bedroom. It's a single-bedroom apartment. We are putting in an egress window, and it meets the qualifications in that it is, it's only 31 inches from the floor of this bedroom to the grade just outside the window and surrounding. So I believe we have 42 inches, 3'6" is the maximum you can go. We're only 2'7", so we comply in that regard.
And did you calculate that in accordance with the housing code provision?
Yeah, I hand measured it, and, I measured to the sill and then down again, and then the ground immediately outside this window actually drops away, so it actually gets lower, because there's a driveway right there, so the curb drops down, so it's not like the ground climbs outside the window, it stays flat or down. And I witnessed it myself, I took measurements, it complies.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it meets the requirements of the housing code so that this, what's technically a basement apartment, is a legal
Yes.
a legal apartment under the housing code.
Yeah, there are two means of egress from this. There's the bedroom, and there's also the actual door and stair that gets you out. So there's two ways to get out.
Which
But
meets,
it does meet all the standards of the housing code, correct?
Yes, in regard to that, I'm.
Well, I seem to be narrowing it to one specific aspect. It does meet all the standards of the housing code. Is that correct?
As far as I understand it, yes, yes. I mean, I looked through it, and I've done these apartments before, and they're fine. I have to have a means of egress, I have to, have a certain amount of window, and so forth, and it does comply. Headroom is okay, it's got enough headroom.
and you already mentioned the two means of
Yes.
egress. So, obviously, it has to comply with building code requirements also.
Yes, but that's, yes.
Okay.
Correct. Smoke detectors and all that, yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you finished discussing the
Yeah, the.
proposal for the basement plan.
We have an exhaust fan for the stove that goes out. There's a window in every room, and the required basement storage exists. That's an area where the ceiling is low, so we're not declaring that as a habitable space. So it's a basement storage space. What else to talk about? When you go up the stairs, and there's an enclosure at the top of the stairs, there's an outswing door, and of course, as mentioned before, a small light outside the door.
Okay. Is there anything else on these plans? Is there any, you're showing, there's no changes, or are there any changes to the existing first or second floors?
No, no.
Okay. And I think you also show the elevation drawing,
Yes,
which
at
you previously discussed.
At the bottom of the page, yes, there's the new stair enclosure, which abuts the house. I want to mention something. You asked me just now if there's any changes to the first floor, and there is one small change. There's a window that currently looks to the rear off the dining room. That window will be shortened because the roof of the new enclosure will interfere with it. So that window will be reduced, but it's an incidental window. It's not critical to anything.
Okay. Okay. All right. Is there anything else, John?
No, I'm sure plenty of questions, but I have nothing else.
Okay. Nothing further for Mr. Guadagnoli.
Mr. Caulfield?
Hey, John, how are you? The planter boxes in the back,
Yeah.
hedges, have you thought of, with hedges, did you look at hedges, or is it the macadam goes all the way to the end of that back there?
Oh, instead of the boxes?
I don't know, like, did you look at that at all, or no?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
no,
I just
didn't.
like boxes, you gotta water them and they might die in that situation.
But they're really nice boxes. I mean,
Okay.
they're not like just
Are they-
garbage. They're really nice.
we
They're
bought-
all-
Are they there as they exist as, like, they're there at the property now? These boxes, these planter boxes are there at this property?
Yes, they're there
Okay.
now,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, yeah, they exist, and
Okay.
we're just gonna slide them back so as to provide better parking, but
Okay.
they're very attractive. They're white and, they're above ground, but nice.
John, could a car drive into that bedroom on the bottom floor? Especially with the driveway there?
Could a car drive into the bedroom?
Yeah, like, let's say they miss the driveway, they're not paying attention, they drive into the, into the bed there. It's sitting right there, it's only 8 foot by whatever. Could it go in there? I mean, I know
they'd
there's
have
a
to
tree
Jump
there.
a curb,
Okay,
but even then, the bedroom is partly buried, so the car would actually hit the edge of the first floor,
okay.
because it's not like completely up, it's partly.
It's a bigger window there, right, in that sense,
Yeah.
like that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Fortunately, the car wouldn't be going that fast in that little parking lot, I hope, but,
Other questions, Mr. McCullough?
I know we've been looking at this application for quite some time, so I want to review a couple of things. One of them is, what's the rationale for increasing the density of this property? I mean, why is it that the applicant has made a request to convert the basement into dwelling space?
well, the applicant's here, and perhaps that'd be a better question for him, right? But my understanding is, it's using space that's there, unused, and,
So right now, this space it's not being used
it's an empty basement.
it's an empty basement, but the most logical use of the space would be for residential purposes, is that?
That's the rationale, yes, but again, Mohammed's here, so.
Our planner's going to cover this, but the density, it complies with the town requirements, adding the third unit. In fact, I think the permitted density would allow 6 or 7 units, actually.
In this property?
Yeah. Our next witness is going to address that, John.
Okay, all right. Another question I have is, just in terms of the, looking at the variance to have a separate entrance going to the basement. The current entrance that services the first and second floors, is there no way that stairwell that accommodates the flow of traffic up to the second floor, that could also be designed in a way that would also create access to the lower level, to the basement level?
Oh, not really, because the amount of hallway that is available as you enter the house to get downstairs is very limited. I would need a whole flight of stairs to do that. And besides, the steps to the basement are already there. They exist now.
I know for going up, right, I understand.
Oh, sorry, for going up?
For going up to the second floor, but I'm talking about, is there a way that a stairwell could be designed that would create the access to the basement rather than having a separate entrance in the rear?
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. The amount of hallway that is there that would not facilitate plus the structural changes will be, enormous, because you have to make a hole in the floor and re-support all that. And it would essentially drop you. No, it would not be really practical, and there just isn't enough hallway space to do this. And also, like I said, the stairs to the basement right now are from the kitchen of the second floor, which they're going to be eliminated. So they're going to be gone. And so the new stairs, which are, along the side of the house, are existing, and they're adequate and generous and easy to climb, they're very gentle stairs, they're nice. It's not like a steep garbage basement stairs, an actual bona fide stair, it's nice. So it's a.
Okay. The other question I have is just in terms of the ladder. And you mentioned, that of course it's not enclosed. And I'm wondering, I mean, it's not uncommon for there to be buildings of this type with a ladder. I guess part of what I'm wondering is, in terms of architectural design, are there models out there or proposals out there for ways of sort of enclosing a ladder like that or making it less visible to the street?
Well, that's precisely why I didn't cover, well, it's one of the reasons I opted to offer this idea of not covering it, because right now you barely see this. I mean, you look through, it's just a skinny little metal ladder with a little cage around it, just a little, for anybody intents and purposes, it looks like a little balcony out off the back. Now, if I go covering it and making a whole contraption of covers over this, it's like, look at me, I'm a, this is sort of like, we satisfy it, get it done, and not, we don't advertise that it's, so I was trying to diminish the visual impact of it. That's why I didn't do that, and that's why we're asking relief from it. I mean, it's, the other thing is, and if you look at the one drawing, the roof actually goes lower than the egress, the means of egress. So if I covered it, the new cover would be a different roof from the house itself. So it would be a whole separate semi-structure, because the existing roof is it comes down and you'd hit your head as you came out. So it just offered a lot of reasons to me not to just try and just get like a little balcony. And again, it's not a regular fire escape with steps and landing and steps and landing. It's just you go out to a balcony and drop down, done. It's that was my thinking.
Okay, and then just along the same line, I mean, when we've looked at fire escapes in the past, we've taken into consideration inclement weather. And so what's the implication of this kind of a ladder? I know it exists now. So, but since, I mean, this is an application that is under consideration, I mean, in terms of that kind of a ladder, when you're dealing with inclement weather like, snow and ice and that kind of thing, I mean, how does, are there ways that we can accommodate so that it's as safe as possible, rather than that it magnifies the risk should it have to be used in?
Well, when
those
one
conditions?
exits the window onto the platform, it's a metal platform, like a what do you call it, like a mesh. So any snow would fall through. I did that on purpose, so you wouldn't get a formation of ice. It's a grating, And so once you stepped out, you're on that grating, and then it's literally 3 feet or 4 feet to the ladder. It's right there. The ladder has a cage around it, so nobody can fall backwards. So I'm not sure covering it, unless we completely encapsulate it. We completely make a wrap around all sides and top, would help. Any inclement weather, the ladder rungs are 3/4 of an inch in diameter. There's not much accumulation there, so I just thought this was, in a way, safer than, in a way, a stair, which has opportunities for slipping and falling. Well, this is a ladder. It's just an enclosed ladder. Well, so that was the reason.
All right, thank you.
The new egress windows for the bedroom, it looks like it's below grade, based on the elevation. Is there a window well that you're providing in front of those windows?
Oh, no, that's not the egress window. That's like the living room window. Yes. The egress window is in the back, in the bedroom.
So that, on your elevation, that window that says E, that's the...
Yes, that window's about 12 to 14 inches below grade. There's a shallow well. We want to make the window as big as possible, to let as much light in as possible, so we, instead of making a creepy little basement window, we dropped it down, and this way, you actually have a window, a real window.
Okay,
And,
so, I mean, so, okay, so in the elevation, the bedroom windows aren't shown, but how does the new egress window for the bedroom compare in terms of the elevation outside of the window?
The windowsill is about 10 inches above the ground to the bedroom. The bedroom windowsill is 10 inches higher than the grade right under it.
Okay. Okay, and I want to go back to Mr. McCullough's question about the existing stair in the shared hallway. On the first floor, there's a door, kind of at the back of the stair. What is that now? Where does that lead to, that door, on your existing first floor plan?
So you mean behind the stair?
Yeah,
Well, if you go straight down the hallway to one door, it takes you into the dining room. The other one is like a closet under that stair.
okay, so when Mr. McCullough suggested that you just extend the stair down to the basement, you said there wasn't enough corridors room. Couldn't you just remove that door and make a landing there and continue the stair down to the basement?
I'm concerned about width and getting furniture down there and all that. That's the only thing. And besides, it would drop you,
In the living room?
it would drop you like kind of right in the middle, like smack dab in the center of the living room. It's like having a stair right in the middle of your, it would be
I mean, it would be on the plan, it would be to the left of the columns that you have here shown on the living
Yeah.
room, right?
it would be, it would be like there.
To the right of the column.
Yeah, and it's up,
Okay, and then the ladder that you're proposing for egress, there's nothing that exists today, so you're just installing that to comply with the requirements?
correct,
Okay.
right.
All right, thank you.
Just one, any concern about flooding from storms or rainwater?
I asked that question, that's the first thing I asked, and it's bone dry, according to the client.
So no history of any water in the basement?
No, not that he's told me, and I've asked, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question about the storage in the basement. So how is that going to be dedicated to the new tenant in the basement, or is that going to be shared with the other?
Just the
apartment?
tenant in the basement, yeah. That's the tenant's storage, yeah.
And that complies with, have you seen the memo from the Development Review Committee? That's the last point, number
200
9.
square feet, yes.
Yeah.
And so this storage is for the basement apartment.
Yep.
And the first floor apartment has storage just off the hallway, and the top floor apartment has a finished attic with lots of storage up there. So those are the three places we would have the storage.
Okay.
Each has their own.
Yep. And as far as the exhaust from the new stove, that is basically going out through that window. That's correct?
Yeah, we'll have to make an opening or adjustment to get the exhaust. It's going to be a real exhaust, not a charcoal filter,
Right.
essentially, yeah.
So, yeah, that was my question. Yeah,
Yes.
So it's, okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to go over the various conditions on the various reports. And some, because I'm not sure what they're saying. The Historic Preservation Commission said the stair enclosure addition will be minimally visible from the street. I'm assuming that's a truism rather than change it, because it strikes me as being minimally visible from the street. Okay. Since Mr. Vieira was asking about the planner's memo, and what is the access on the second floor unit to the attic? Is it a stairway? Is it a pull-down stair? How do they get to the storage?
In the, let's see here, existing second floor plan, the rightmost floor plan, there's a revision number 2, which states stair up to attic storage.
Okay, so it's a regular stairway.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And, okay, then the planner's memo said there are a couple of landscaping comments. One is to add landscaping on the north side. I don't believe you've done that. Are you requesting not to do that, or are you willing to do that? I mean, you have a fair amount of, there's the shrubbery along the property line.
Yeah, I think that comment was made before I submitted, before I really took an assessment of what was there. And this line of shrubs, they range from 8 to 18 feet in height. And it's just a visual wall. And then there's also a smattering of trees. Every one of these trees is not random. They're exactly where they are. I measured them. And a couple of them are pine trees. They're evergreen. And the rest are deciduous. And then it's got this row of very tall, narrow, it's like a hedgerow right along the
I mean,
property
your
line.
plan
So-
shows them on the property line. Whose vegetation is that?
I'm not sure. It kind of straddles the property. Is it yours? Your bushes?
It's honestly in between the property
We
line
don't-
between mine and my neighbor.
Yeah, I didn't ask that question. I don't know, but it's there.
It's a question of, if it's the neighbors, he could go and cut it down, and then, but then I guess he's the one who's gonna suffer for looking at yours. Okay, and then my understanding is you've at least somewhat revised the plan to show what's currently there. I mean, you show everything, not everything's identified in terms of what it is,
Oh.
correct?
Oh, you mean the species of tree, like that?
Right.
Oh, no, I didn't know. I only know that there are 2 pine trees. Yeah, the rest are deciduous.
Okay, and then you testified about what lighting's there, but other than physically showing the structures, do they all, I mean, some of them indicate like a 60-watt wall fixture. The ones along the path, is there anything that shows what they are other than a label that says ground lighting?
They're little bollards. They're little low bollards that with those fins that the light shines down on the ground.
Okay.
You know what I mean? They're
Yeah, yes, I've seen them. I'm just trying to, those are all existing now?
yes.
Okay, you added this.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the engineer's comments, which I had here a little bit ago. Just bear with me a second, okay. Okay, in number 5, the engineer has, that you provide spot grade elevations at all building corners. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah, yes, but a question I have is nothing's changing. Is it still required if nothing is changing? I mean, we're not affecting the topography one bit.
Okay.
If it has to be, we'll do it. I mean, it's okay.
Well,
we'll
let
get-
me do what, the next comment is spot grade elevations 15 feet from the exterior building walls, and basement floor elevations. I think, that I think we should require, because
Okay.
in order to evaluate the basement apartment conforming to code, we need that information.
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Okay, and then my understanding is the revised plans show the limit of disturbance, and you've quantified the square footage that'll be disturbed, correct?
The limit of disturbance, you mean
The impervious.
Yes, 183 square feet of new,
Yeah, my understanding is that's the only real disturbance you're doing to the site, correct?
correct, yeah, that's it.
Okay, and then her comment number 11, existing and proposed roof leaders shall be identified and mapped. Do you have any issue with doing that?
No, not at all.
Okay. Is there anything currently where you have the fire escape going down?
You mean a picture of it? Like,
No, are there any roof leaders that go down in that area that you're going to potentially interfere with?
oh, yeah, no, because it's on a lower subroof that has a
Okay, but-
leader in another
but-
location. Yeah.
Even lower roofs sometimes have
Yeah.
leaders and whatever, what are these?
Yeah, the
to
leader
get to
does
the
not come
ground.
anywhere near the ladder, it's on the other side. No.
Okay, and then number 12, dependent on the window well depth, fall protection may be required. Did you determine whether that was necessary or not?
Right, the window well only, it's only like 14 inches deep, so it's
Okay, and did you provide number 13, specifics of the trash enclosure?
no, only in description, but if I have to prepare a drawing of it, I certainly will.
Yeah, the planning office seems to care a lot about making sure the
No
roof
problem.
is covered and all those wonderful things.
Okay.
And number 14, we're back to the lighting fixtures. Do you have any information on this that demonstrates they're complying with both the minimum and maximum lighting, depending upon whether we're talking about on-site or off-site?
I have my lighting designer I work with, and I gave him this. He has not gotten back to me, but I can provide that as
Okay,
part of the,
We'll provide a lighting plan.
a lighting plan, yeah. I do know, though, that the 0.2-foot candles, I gave the outline of that to show that the parking lot is properly illuminated. However, I don't have all the internal, photometric lines to indicate it. So I'll spec that light fixture out to do, make sure that it's,
And-
we do get that light.
And my understanding is you're not proposing any new plantings, correct?
Right.
Okay, and, And then, do you have any objection to our requiring conditions 18, 19, and 20?
Snow storage, yeah, sure, 18
I
storage.
mean, that's just putting, you
Just to show it
testified
on
where
the
you're
plan.
doing it, it's just putting a link
Sure,
on
the
the
curb
plan,
details.
so
No problem
in
at
the
all, sure.
future, someone can say, that's where you're supposed to put the snow if they decide to plow it out to the street, or other things that people sometimes do, or snow removal people decide.
Sure, will do.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board? Okay. Do I quote, well, I'll do, since I don't think we have any public, I'll do them all at the end.
Okay.
I'm going to call your next witness.
Thank you. William Stimmel.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
William Stimmel, S-T-I-M-M-E-L. My professional address is P.O. Box 280, Rutherford, New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, offering Mr. Stimmel as an expert in the field of professional planning to accept his qualifications.
Yes.
Your license is still in good standing?
Yes.
Thank you, Bill. Okay. Would you begin by discussing the application that's before the board, beginning with, I guess, the existing conditions?
Sure, just very briefly, the lot is a rectangular property with an area of 12,203 square feet. That is .28 acres. The dimensions are roughly 61 by 200. It's currently developed with a 2.5-story residential structure with a footprint of 1,936 square feet. The building as it exists now provides 2 residential dwelling units. The ground floor unit is a 3-bedroom. The second floor unit is also a 3-bedroom, and there is no living space in the basement. There's one curb cut which leads to an asphalt paved driveway running along the southern property line that leads to a paved parking area at the rear of the lot. That paved parking area also has a detached 2-car garage at the southwest corner of the lot.
Okay. And then briefly, just an overview of what's proposed. Actually, I don't think that's necessary. Why don't you talk about the surrounding neighborhood?
Sure, I have a couple of exhibits. Don't have Janice Talley's password. Oh, sorry.
Do we have hard copies?
Yeah, that's why I'm not a hacker.
Mr. Trembulak, do we have hard copies of these exhibits that are now being shown on the screen?
I'm not sure I know what they are.
No.
That sounds like
Probably
a no.
You do not. Right.
So are we going to collectively mark this presentation as Exhibit A2? Is that how we should do it? I'm not sure what we're getting. Okay.
We'll provide a hard copy.
This is just an excerpt from the Montclair zoning map. It shows the subject property located roughly centrally in that exhibit in the orange area, which is located along the southbound side of Grove Street. The next 7 lots to the north of the subject property are all located in the R3 zone. As you can see, the adjoining lots going to the north are all roughly the same size as the subject property, roughly that same dimension, 61 by 200 foot in depth. The properties to the south, that'd be the pinkish area, are the C3 zone, which allows for a variety of commercial uses, including restaurants, retail sales, art galleries, and banks. The properties across the street are split between the R2 2-family zone, that's that yellowish color, and then the R4 3-story apartment zones. The lots which are to the north of the site in the R3 zone are generally developed in accordance with the permitted uses in the area. Going in order from the site headed north, it's a 3-family, a 2-family, a 3-family, a 3-family, a 4-family, a 3-family, and then the last one, it wasn't clear if it was a 2 or 3-family. The same thing with the existing uses across Grove Street from the site. There's a mix of 2 larger apartment buildings with 1, 2, and 3-family dwellings. The lots to the south of the site, the immediately adjoining lot going to the south along Grove Street is part of the post office property. The post office fronts on Glen Ridge Avenue. And then to the south of that is a funeral home with a surface parking lot. So that's the existing development pattern in the surrounding area. As I noted, the site is located in the R3 Garden Group zone. The proposed use is a conditionally permitted use in the zone according to Ordinance Section 347-54, subsection B, which states that an existing principal residential building may be converted to provide more than 2 dwelling units for use by more than 2 families, provided that the entire building, when so converted, shall comply with the requirements of the building code, which are applicable to newly constructed multifamily dwellings in the zone, and provided further that, and then there's 7 conditions for this particular conditional use. The first one is that the floor area of each dwelling unit shall be not less than 800 square feet. The 2 existing units and the proposed unit are all over 800 square feet, so we comply with that requirement. The second standard is that the principal building on the lot shall occupy not more than 1/4 of the ground area of the lot. We comply with that. The building coverage is 15.9%, so it's well below the 25% that's permitted. The third standard was repealed. The fourth standard is that the ground coverage of the building, exclusive of open porches, garages, or other area not within the area occupied by normal living quarters, shall be not less than 1,250 square feet. We comply with that requirement. Goes on to state that the area of the lot shall be not less than 15,000 square feet within 150 feet of the front street line. So the area of the lot is 12,203 square feet. That's one of our deviations from the standard. Still in the same requirement, the density shall not be greater than 24 units per acre. The proposed density of the site with the third unit would be 10.7 dwelling units per acre. Mr. Trembulak had stated before that we'd be allowed to have 6 or 7 units based on the permitted density. It would be 6.7 according to my calculations, so rounded down, 6 would be permitted on the site without exceeding the density requirement. The fifth conditional use standard is that fire escapes or stairways leading to the second floor or any higher floor shall be completely enclosed within the building walls, and we have deviation for that for the external emergency access ladder in the northern facade of the building. The sixth standard is that the interior design and arrangement of the dwelling units shall be consistent with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development minimum property standards, and we comply with those requirements. And then the seventh and final is that access to all dwelling units shall be within a converted building shall be provided by a common entrance situated in the wall of the building facing the street on which the lot has frontage. So the eastern face of the building toward Grove Street provides one centrally located access door which leads to the ground floor and second floor units. The basement is proposed to be accessed by a stair in the northern facade of the building, so that would be one deviation from the standard. The ground floor has a second point of access to the rear of the building off of the parking lot, which could presumably be looked at as a second deviation from the conditional use standard, but that is, of course, an existing condition.
All right, so you've identified the conditional use variances. Can you discuss with the board the criteria for granting conditional use variances under section D3?
Yes, the applicant is requesting a D3 variance for the deviation from the conditional use standard. The courts have found that imposing the same standards for a D3 variance that would be applied for a D1 variance is inappropriate. There's a middle path in this case that it is directed that we follow, that the use is somewhere between a permitted use and a prohibited use, but closer to a permitted use. The conditional use, of course, is permitted in the zone subject to meeting all the conditions that I just went through, based on the determination of the governing body that that type of use is appropriate for the zone in which the site is located. So a discussion of the positive and negative criteria as it relates to the conditional use is focused on the deviation from the standards, not the appropriateness of the use, the three-family use in this zone itself. So as far as the positive criteria goes, the applicant must demonstrate that the site is appropriate for the use in spite of the deviation from the conditional use standards. So our deviations from those standards boil down to three things. The first is the area of the lot where 15,000 square feet is required and where 12,203 square feet is existing and proposed. I think the first thing to think about is the concern that the applicant would be squeezing an overly large building in an area, too large a building on a lot. I think based on the existing surroundings, the fact that we've got 7 lots to the north of us with roughly the same or smaller dimensions, which are currently developed with existing three-family dwellings. Based on my evaluation of the area, I believe that the site as proposed will be in keeping with those lots. There's no increase in square footage of the existing building footprint, no real addition to the building. The existing building is harmonious with those adjoining lots to the north, and the proposed won't change and will therefore still be harmonious. In terms of the building coverage, we're at 15% and change, where 25% is permitted, so we are well below that standard. So although the lot is undersized, the building is undersized relative to the standards of the zone. The second deviation from the conditional use standards for the emergency access to Unit 2 in the northern facade. The access in question obviously is going to have limited usage, hopefully no usage. It would be only for emergencies. It will be screened from adjoining lots and rights of way by the existing building, and landscaping will have minimal visual impact to the surrounding area. And then finally, the access for the basement unit, which will be through a separate entrance in the northern facade. Again, the ground floor and second floor units are accessed through that central door in the eastern facade toward Grove Street. If you look at the site from Grove Street, it's going to present itself as a one-family, as do most of the adjoining lots going to the north on Grove Street, which are in the same zone. And really, there's going to be no significant change in the visual appearance from Grove Street. So for all those reasons, I believe that the deviation from the standard will have minimal impact on the surrounding area, and the site will continue to be appropriate for the proposed use. The other side of that, the negative criteria, the applicant has to demonstrate that the deviations from the standard do not cause substantial detriment to the public good and do not impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance, or if substantial detriment is found, that conditions can be imposed to mitigate that. Based on the materials that have been submitted, the testimony that's been provided, I see no substantial detriment to the public good or impairment to the zone plan and zoning ordinance. As far as the application itself, it's a conditionally permitted use with minor deviations from the requirements of the zone, minimal changes to the structure. The parking requirement is met on site. In terms of conditions, the applicant has already modified the plan based on comments presented by the Historic Preservation Committee and the DRC, and has agreed to modify further based on the review letter from Boswell Engineering, as well as obviously any concerns the board members may have. And then finally, there are a few C variances and one design waiver associated with the application. The first C variance is for minimum parking space width, where 9 feet is required, 8.3 feet is existing and proposed. That relates to the parking spaces within the garage are a little bit deficient in terms of the width. That's, of course, an existing condition which is not being impacted by the proposed development. The 4 parking spaces outside the garage are fully compliant with the ordinance requirements. The second existing nonconformity is for the minimum driveway setback, where 1 foot is required, 0 feet are existing and proposed. Again, an existing condition not being impacted by the proposed development. That driveway goes right up to the property line. And then finally, there is one design waiver for minimum driveway width, where 12 feet is required, 9.42 feet is existing and proposed. Again, existing condition not being impacted by the development. Obviously, this is going to be a fairly low-volume driveway. The site has 2 3-bedroom apartments now. We're adding one 1-bedroom apartment. So in terms of vehicular traffic to the property, it will be minimal, less than 1 trip during the peak hours. It's probably worth noting also that the 9.42 feet that exist there is more than adequate for one-way traffic, but the 12 feet that's required wouldn't be sufficient for 2-way traffic anyway. So in terms of 2-way operation, it doesn't really make a difference as far as that's concerned. So for all those reasons, we believe that the applicant has provided sufficient justification for the requested variance relief and would be happy to take the board's questions.
Thank you. No further questions.
And Mr. McCulloch?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just going back to the density question that I raised earlier. So you mentioned that this is a property that could accommodate 6 units. Would you describe those units? I mean, if they were to have 6 units, what would they be? A 1-bedroom unit? Is that what could fit in the structure?
Just a calculation based on the density and the lot area, not in terms of how the building would fit on the site. That's all that was. We didn't take it to the extent that you could fit 6 one-bedroom units in this building or anything along those lines. It's just a calculation of permitted density and existing lot area.
For given the size of the structure itself, it could,
Given the size of the lot-
theoretically, it could accommodate 6.
Given the size of the lot itself, not considering the structure at all, a lot this size would be permitted 6 units based solely on the density.
And also would be able to accommodate parking, the parking standard as well, at the same time?
Again, it wasn't a detailed analysis. It was just saying that per the density requirement, this is what would be permitted.
Mr. Caulfield?
Hi, Mr. Stimmel. The properties to the north, you're saying, do you think that they are in violation of that under 15,000 square foot?
The lot area?
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is like, just bear with me for a second. Like, do you think this R3 garden is maybe mislabeled somehow? Because I think what they're trying to say is that they're looking for buildings to have like 150 frontage on that. And most of these buildings along that street are like 60, 80. No one really has that 150 frontage, right?
Yeah, no one has the 150 feet of frontage.
So what was the town's aim at putting that R3 garden in this location, you think?
Sorry, I was just trying to zoom in on the exhibit to answer the first part of the question a little bit more accurately. Right, so the existing lots, the subject property is 60.8, 62.5, 62.5, 60, 62, 66, 45, and change, 45 and change, and then 50. So obviously they're below the required width.
Correct.
And size.
And I would expect that some of those have been grandfathered in, when the master plan was redone, that they looked at these buildings, as you noted, that they are 3 families, 2 families, et cetera. There's a mix of some sort of use in that.
Correct.
But my question just to you is that this R3 zone garden, like when I first looked at it, I thought, oh, that's interesting. Maybe they're looking for people to convert their garden or their basements into another residence in there and stuff like that. But then when you get caught up with the square footage, it specifically wants them not to be under the 1250. We're close to that. I agree in that sense, but I just want to pick your brain on what you think reason why that this R3 garden, is this zone misinterpreted here, or?
I'm always hesitant to try to read the minds of the municipalities when they adopt ordinances and master plans. I think it's possible that it was looking at bigger buildings on bigger lots, didn't contemplate perhaps that you have a section like this with the existing land use pattern being what it is, and the possibility that this site, although short of some of the requirements, does meet the majority of them, and in doing so, appears to be appropriate for the type of use proposed. So it's hard to say what the members had in mind when they adopted the ordinance.
Ms. Harris?
No questions.
Mr. Church?
No question.
Mr. Simon?
No questions.
Mr. Vieira?
No question.
Okay. I don't have any questions. Mr. Tremulak, these were your 2 witnesses?
That's it, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Are there any members of the public who have questions, testimony, statements, anything whatsoever you want to say about the application? This is your time to do it. Please come forward and say whatever you have to say. Okay. Mr. Tremulak, seeing that the few members of the public who are undoubtedly here for the next application are not interested in commenting on this one, do you have anything further you wish to say before we discuss and vote on the application?
I would just sum up briefly by saying I think this is a good application. You know, with respect to the conditional use variances that we're seeking, again, the standard enunciated by the Supreme Court in the Coventry Square decision is this use, what we're proposing, is this still appropriate for this site, even though we don't meet these requirements? And, you know, for the reasons Mr. Stimmel articulated, I believe we meet that requirement. I mean, here we're adding one unit, we're increasing density. We're well within the permitted density for the site. We're increasing density, but not increasing the size of the building at all. I think that's a positive thing. I mean, it's in a zone which permits more than 2 dwelling units on a site. The use that we're proposing is consistent with the uses of the properties noted on that exhibit to the north on Grove Street, all similar size lots. Most of which are being used as 3 or 4 family buildings. It fits in this neighborhood. Obviously, it works for this property. With respect to the other conditional use variances, I mean, obviously, if the board insists on it, we could provide an enclosure for the ladder. But given where, you know, I think that's more an aesthetic requirement, or the reason for that is aesthetics. Or visibility. Here, there's hardly any visibility to that ladder, which is pushed to the rear of the property, certainly not visible from Grove Street. Might be visible to the neighbor to the north, however, there's large trees there that block it. And, you know, given that, I think there's very, you know, minimal, if any, aesthetic effect of allowing that ladder to be unenclosed as we're proposing. With respect to the third variance, again, the ordinance requires a common entrance. I think the reason for that is to create the appearance that this is not a multifamily building, that there's one entrance to all of the units in the building. Here, we're not changing the front. It's still going to have the appearance of a large single-family house from the street, and we're adding an entrance to the rear instead, and so we're not adding a separate entrance to the front facade of the building. You know, I know the board has had similar applications, one of which I was involved with. I think Mr. Stimmel may have been our expert on that as well, 41 Harrison Avenue a few years ago, which was a very similar application where the board allowed for an entrance to a unit that would be located either in the rear or to the side of the building. So here again, I don't think it has any negative detriment, and I think it works perfectly fine for this property. And in terms of the appropriateness of the site, I think that's also confirmed by the fact that we're providing adequate parking for the additional unit, and the fact that we're adding a small one-bedroom additional unit also, you know, is a positive for the town by creating that additional dwelling unit. The other variances are basically pre-existing conditions, and you know, I think there's no opposition to the application. I think we've met our burden to prove the variances, and we've addressed the site plan issues, and we would hope that the board would favor us with an approval of the application. Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, for me, I'm just going to just speak what I think right now, and then I'll come back to a little bit here. For me, I feel like this zone that was been created, the R3 garden, was put together, and then it was a stipulation there that they didn't want anything under a certain square footage. Now, we are close to that, but we don't meet that standard. That's understandable. But whoever came up with this R3 zone was looking for something that this area does not have. So I'm slightly confused about that aspect of it. But as we look at all those other buildings and all the other units that are there, that, there are there are 3 families in this zone and stuff like that. So I'm leaning towards that, but I'm slightly confused about the zone itself.
Ms. Harris?
I think I'm generally in favor of this application and the variances requested. I think to Mr. Tremulak's point, most of these variances are existing conditions, and since the applicant isn't really adding any built spaces to the property, I think it's fine if we allow them. I am having trouble with the applicant not complying with the common stair, because it seems like a pretty simple exercise to have a common stair from that main corridor, so I'd like to hear what the rest of my fellow board members think about that.
Mr. Church? Yeah, I am in favor of the application because of the fact that it doesn't do any detriment to the area in which it's located, the building's not being widened, that there's no height changes. There is the situation where I think some exploration should be done through a entrance to that basement apartment from the interior. Now, I understand the architect saying, or the saying that it's a massive job to do, but it should be explored. But generally, I'm in favor of the application. I don't think that it does a detriment at all to the master plan. It doesn't change the complexion of the neighborhood as it now stands. In the future, if the township and the planning board wish to change the zoning in that area, then maybe something would have to be revisited. But right now, what we have is what we're dealing with. And I believe this, with all the variances and everything else that we're listening to tonight, this plan fits in with what exists. So therefore, under those circumstances, I'd be in favor of this application.
Mr. Simon?
I'm in favor. No more.
Mr. Vieira?
Wait. I'm also in favor of the application. I think it would have been a different story if you're proposing 2 or 3 bedroom apartments, but it's a one bedroom apartment, so I think it does not change anything from the outside. I am struggling a little bit on that D variance as far as the common entrance, but I think for me, it's not a deal breaker. But, yeah, thanks.
Mr. McCulloch?
I think that the building itself visually is very attractive and certainly contributes to the neighborhood, and so I very much appreciate that. The fact that there will be no structural changes in that regard. I do think that the common entry is something that could be explored further. I don't see a lot of evidence that the architect has really looked at that and explored all the options. And so I understand that it would be a costly thing to do, but I'm just not sure that as much of a good faith effort has been utilized yet to determine whether or not that is possible or not possible. And so I struggle with that a little bit. I've asked a question about density because even if it is a 1-bedroom unit, this is an area that has a lot of density already. And it periodically, the density expands because you have a funeral home, and then you also have the postal office there. And then we all know that there are additional plans that are being taken under consideration for the Lackawanna Plaza area. So density is a factor, and not that this one particular unit would make all the difference. It still is part of the overall formula, and that's why I raise it, because I think, it does add to traffic, and other potential congestion in the area, and so I just think it's something that has to be taken into consideration. But I think that, you know, I mean, in terms of the project, despite the questions that I'm raising, I would say I could support it, but I would want to know that, all options have been explored around the common entry, because I'm just not satisfied that has been really looked at or examined as closely as possible before doing the alternative.
I understand the concerns about the common entrance, but my view on this was that making the best of the existing footprint, making a relatively low-cost apartment available to, you know, someone who might not be able to afford all the new construction in Montclair. The extent of going through making a common entrance would just add to the cost, which would just raise the rent that would have to be charged, and it kind of becomes counterproductive. So that's why it wasn't a sticking issue with me. And I think just the fact that, you know, it's an existing staircase, it's not like they built a separate entrance for that unit. They're just using what's already there, which is part of the reason this isn't attractive, because they're not modifying the external view or interrupting anything from any existing condition. So I hear the concern, but I think in this case, with this building, the variance is warranted. So it's just my point on this.
I'm not going to help on that issue one way or the other, but, okay, so let me start with, Tommy, can you make a note that next year's annual report should address either or both of whether this group of properties are properly in the R3 zone, and whether the R3 zoning makes any sense, which I'm going to explain in a second. So, you know, one of the things we're supposed to look at is whether the requested variance will result in a substantial impairment of the zone plan. And here we're in a situation where the zoning makes no sense whatsoever. If you're doing multifamily dwellings, you get 18 units per acre. If you're doing townhouses, which I would normally consider multifamily dwellings, you get 10 units per acre, or 12 units if you're preserving the existing house. But if you're doing a 2 to a 3 or a 3 to a 4, you get to go to 24 units per acre, and that's just, you're in the same zone and at drastically different densities being allowed. You know, so I can't really say this is a substantial impairment of the zone plan. One, they're doing half of what the permitted density would be, which is consistent. Then you also have a distinction of going from conversion of a one-family to a two-family. You only need a 5,000 square foot lot with 50 feet of frontage. You go from a 2 to a 3, you need a lot size that's 3 times the size. There's not a lot of logic there, and so, you know, one, I don't think we can say this is a substantial impairment of the zone plan. And it's certainly not a detriment to the public good. You know, I think in terms of the allowing a third unit, given that it is half the permitted density, given the applicant is keeping the existing structure as is, not expanding, given that they meet the parking requirements, that they clearly have met the Coventry Square criteria for getting the conditional use variance for the 15,000, not meeting the 15,000 square foot requirement. The unenclosed fire escape, which normally I would be opposed to, you know, this is about as obscure a location as you could have. You know, I do share Ms. Harris's concern about, did they really look at doing this? I think, you know, the flip side of that in terms of the common entrance, I tend to agree with Mr. Simon that, yes, there are solutions, but they would be I can't conceive of it being done without a lot of cost, and I certainly wouldn't want them to require both an enclosed fire escape and doing a common entrance. As the 2 parking spaces in the garage are, that's an existing condition. They're being undersized. He's proposing the 4 outdoor spaces to be fully conforming. The driveway with a setback of 0 feet, that's an existing condition, and it's bordering the parking lot for the post office, so having the required 1 foot would do nothing, because there's no way vegetation could be maintained in that area in any event, and it would make what is already a driveway that's too narrow even narrower. I have no problem with, given it's an existing condition, the waiver for the not meeting the 12-foot requirement for the width. Let me do conditions, and then we should discuss whether we want to push on the 2 conditions, either or both of the 2 conditions. That the new unit fully meet all requirements of the housing code, that there be no tree removal, and if the future there is any tree removal, it's subject to the tree removal ordinance, and if we are keeping the exterior fire escape, the unenclosed fire escape, that if any of those large trees that are between where the fire escape's located and the property to the north, that they replaced by trees that will reach a mature height similar to what's there. That the 4 outdoor parking spaces conform to the ordinance as was testified. Conditions 6, 11, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, and 20 from the engineer's report. I can do that more slowly if you want.
I think I got it.
So let's discuss fire escapes and common entrances and what everyone thinks.
I don't have an issue with the fire escape because there isn't one there, and I think building one on the exterior of this building would A, be a huge expense, and also be unsightly and probably visible from the street. With the interior stair, I just want to make sure everybody understands the exterior stair is existing, but they're proposing to make an existing window smaller to accommodate a roof, right? So there's the opening there, there's siding work that they have to do there. They have to put a roof on the existing, and they're extending the landing and putting a wall there. So it's not no cost. There is a cost associated with using that stair, and I don't believe adding a common entrance from the existing entrance is going to exceed the cost to use this rear entrance. So I think it's a very doable solution to comply with this condition of the zoning ordinance. That's my 2 cents.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with my colleague. I don't have any problem with the fire ladder. Under other conditions, I would look for it to be enclosed, but I don't have a problem with that. I think in terms of the common entry, the biggest concern that I have is precedent. And, when you make exceptions, then you sort of open the window or open the opportunity for others to then bring applications that make similar proposals. And it becomes more difficult, to say, well, we want to maintain the standard that was agreed to originally. And so that's why I want to be sure that we've really sort of exhausted the options before we agree that a new precedent could be set. That's really the concern that I have around that.
But I feel like for your concern, like the precedent is set because they've put this as an R3. I think that someday down the road, they're gonna knock all those buildings down and build a big building, because that's gonna be, the layout has been happening on that, because they've done that. Well,
that'll come to us.
yeah, well, I'll let be retired. But you know. as
I
the-
haven't been allowed to retire, so don't count on that. Other thoughts? Someone should make a motion then.
Before you move on that, Mr. Chairman, I seem to have heard 3 board members express concerns about the common entrance and, you know, I think wanting to give us an opportunity to explain why it's not feasible to comply with that. And I think I would like the opportunity to have Mr. Guadinoli review that and come back and explain to the board that there are no, you know, feasible alternatives to that, because otherwise, I'm afraid we'd have 3 negative votes on a D variance, and the application would be defeated. And I'd like the opportunity to respond to the board's concerns to make sure that we've exhausted, that there is no realistic or feasible possibility to provide for entrance through the common front door.
Is that accurate? I mean, I've heard negative comments about the common elements from board members McCullough and Harris. Mr. Caulfield, were your negative? I wasn't sure.
No, I
heard
thought
you.
Mr. Vieira had that same
So,
concern.
Mr. Vieira, I think what I'd like to do is poll the board on that issue, just to see if we need to defer it. So, board members McCullough and Harris, you said you want further, you're hesitant to vote yes on that. Is there anybody else who's not willing to vote yes on that issue and wants it to go to a subsequent meeting?
I changed my mind. It makes sense, the point that you made about adding cost, and I think it will add cost.
In which case, I changed my mind, Mr. Chairman. I'm okay with the board proceeding.
One of us hasn't, Mr. Church?
The cost that was enumerated by Ms. Harris. Oh, I'm sorry. The cost to do fix the stairway outside, there's a cost there too, but there's going to be a cost to this whole project. I think that I'm not hard and fast on this. I just wanted it to be open for discussion. So I would withdraw any negative connotation I may have had concerning leaving the application as it is and not insisting on a common entrance with a stairwell inside. So I would withdraw that and say that I would be in favor of the application as it's presented with the conditions that are going to be put on it, because it isn't a detriment to the zone as the zone now exists. If in the future the zone changes, then that's something else, and maybe none of us will be here when that happens. But I withdraw my hesitancy to vote in favor of this application as it's presented and change my vote to yes.
So if we have them come back, what would we want them to do, I guess is my question.
Well, I guess, can we just vote per variance and kind of poll each variance and see where we
Well,
are?
that's what I was trying, I mean, look, we could split out the common entry D variance.
Right, I think we're
But I
all
don't
in
wanna-
agreement on everything
but it-
else.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was trying to do, to poll the board, because it seems now there's only 2 in opposition. They need 5 affirmative votes.
There's a chair who has not voiced an opinion one way or
Oh,
another.
oops.
But the chair did.
I thought so too.
That's true. Here. I lumped the two together and said, let's hear comments. If we ask them to come back, what would we be asking them to do? Because I don't really want to send them off and then we say, oh, that isn't really what we're looking for.
Well, from my vantage point, the focus would specifically be on the common entrance. And the question would be, they're having explored what might be possible options for accommodating that, including what the cost would be and how that would compare with the costs that are associated with this other entrance that has to be renovated in order to accommodate it, the basement level unit.
I mean, I think specifically, we'd want to see a plan showing that entrance to the basement from the main common area, the main entrance, including sections with showing the headroom underneath the stairs, so we can see if it really is possible.
Would we want cost estimates as to what that would involve?
In comparison to what's being proposed with the exterior stair, yes.
But is that within our purview to consider the cost?
Well, I mean,
Because anything could be done.
The applicant brought it up as an issue prohibiting them from complying with this variance. So if the issue is cost, then we should understand what that cost is. It's not within our purview, but that was given as a reason why they can't
I think,
comply.
I think at some level, we do, we should not impose conditions that make a development cost prohibitive that is otherwise acceptable to us, in which this, clearly is. What if they came back and looked at the, 6, 8, whatever it houses that are in the same zone along Grove Street, along there, and said half of them don't have a common entrance for all units, most of them are 3 families, would that be something that, John said he, was concerned about a precedent, Angela, I don't know if that would be persuasive to you.
I don't know. This is a very complicated case because there could be precedents here and that stuff. Putting the staircase in interior forces this building to be, it has a 3-family, but it's still one access technically, adhering to kind of a 2-family zone in that sense, and not having that entrance in the back. So I'm either way, as Michael would say.
Okay, now, the question for you is, can we
Yes.
approve everything other than that and defer that?
Yes.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion that we approve all the variances other than the common entrance requirement, subject to the conditions I did before? I guess then we would be deferring site plan approval because arguably doing that could impact the site plan. Someone want to make that motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Why don't you do a roll call, just so there's no question?
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Caulfield?
Yes.
Mr. Church?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Mr. Vieira?
Yes.
Okay, and then, Mr. Trembulac, will you be able to come back and by our next meeting is April 19th, correct?
That's
And
correct.
address that?
Yes, we will.
Okay,
I know
and-
consent to an extension of time for the board to act.
Yes, we consent.
Okay, and just for members of the public who may be watching, in addition to the few in the room, this matter is being continued until our meeting on April 19th. There'll be no further notice. The only issue will be whether we should grant the variance from the common entrance requirement. And just to reiterate, I think there are dual approaches, but you should probably address both. Is the cost of doing it with, rough plans showing what's involved, addressing headroom and whatever, which would obviously, and the second approach is do the existing
Look at other
buildings
properties.
in that zone along that side of Grove Street, do they have common entrances or, okay.
Okay.
We'll see you next month.
Okay.
We're going to take a brief break. If the next applicant can come up, we should be able to do you much quicker than we've done the others. But we'll take we'll come back at 5 after if everyone could. Okay, the next application is that of Philip Marmon Halm E Santana for a variance to construct a second-story addition and covered porch on a property located at 1 Mount Vernon Road. The property is in an R1 one-family zone district. The property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 17 in Block 4601. The proposal requires a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-45B2 to allow a front yard setback of along Grove Street of 32 feet 4 inches. The current setback of the existing house, which is the same as the current setback of the existing house, where 36 feet 10 inches is required, or taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Okay. Would you both raise your right hands? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your names and addresses, please.
I do.
I'm Eric Schultz, the architect, 35 Alexander Avenue, Montclair, New Jersey.
And Mr. Schultz, your license in the state of New Jersey, your license is in good standing, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and,
Philip Marmon Halm,
and your address?
1 Mount Vernon Road.
Okay, Mr. Sibilia, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
Okay, you can proceed.
I think Philip's going to say a few words now.
Yeah, we're looking to do a second-story addition on the existing house. We're in a ranch. It's a one-level. You know, with the addition, we'd like to put all the bedrooms on the second floor and have the first floor just be open space. It's a pretty modest addition, I would say, and as I mentioned in the notice, we're really just looking to have that addition be within the existing, you know, kind of footprint of the current house. You know, modest, I would say, in every measure, and really just taking inspiration, I would say, from other homes that we've seen in Montclair, and looking to get our home kind of on even footing, I would say, with some of the other beautiful homes here.
And so just to follow up on what Philip's saying is that by bringing the bedrooms up to the second floor, that opens up the lower level, all living space. But the goal of the project really is to convert this 50s ranch style to a 2-story, essentially convert it to a center hall colonial, but one with some more Victorian proportions that allows it to be a little more modest in scale. So I'll just jump to the drawings, walk you through that, starting with A0, which is the site plan, just to point out the existing front yard setbacks. One on Grove Street, you can see runs through the existing footprint such that it is encroaches about 4.5 feet at the rear of the house and about 3 feet towards the front of the house. And just looking at the neighbor at 383, a couple houses down, just to show that that's also the case with that house, that encroaches even more than the 4.5 feet, just to make a note of that, that context. So just jumping to the next page, just to note that we're not asking for variance to encroach on the setback on Mount Vernon itself. We're staying behind that line. First drawing, A1, is the existing floor plan, which shows all the bedrooms currently facing the rear of the house, and then the living room and the kitchen facing the front of the house. And then that line of the Grove Street setback, you can see how it cuts through at about, maxing out at about 4.5 feet on the upper right portion of the drawing. Next page, A2, is the proposed first floor plan. Where now with the bedrooms upstairs, the living space now faces the back with a visual connection to the patio. There's also a small home office facing the rear yard. Now the kitchen stays where it is. Dining room faces the front. The front door is moved about 1.5 feet towards the front yard, which will allow for stair hall, center hall that's separated from the new open living space. The bottom of the page shows the new, a very narrow front porch supported by traditional 8-inch round columns over a new stone landing and 2 stone steps. Keep going. A3, this is the second floor, which is the addition. When you come up the stairs, the first thing is the alcove landing with a window facing south to let light in at that point. To the right is the main bedroom suite. To the left, two modest-sized bedrooms and a hall bath. A4, this is the front elevation. And here we'll see the main roof, the steeply pitched gable runs the entire width of the house. To the left of the page would then be a cross gable, also steeply pitched, and that's centered over the windows of the kitchen below and then the bedroom above. To the right of the page, a steeply pitched shed dormer over the master bedroom, and then below that is a very low slope roof over the front porch, which is then supported by the traditional columns over the stone landing. Just a note on the features here, tall, narrow casements with an extended tall trim above the window. The eaves are extended and supported by decorative brackets. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the front elevation. Looking at the back elevation, the same steeply pitched shed roof. Dormers are one each over each bathroom. In the middle, there's a raised gable that's over the new window to the alcove. Also has the decorative brackets. Just below that, a new canopy over existing doors and shutters that are in front of the existing bedroom. Again, the tall, narrow casements, the extended trim, consistent throughout the house. Next page, A6, is the side elevation facing the houses on Mount Vernon. Again, shows the steeply pitched roof, the tall, narrow windows, extended trim. Just a note about where the bottom of the eave of that roof starts is quite low, 16 feet, several feet below a typical two-story house. There's a new canopy over the existing kitchen door. And again, the decorative brackets to be consistent. A7, this is the last elevation. This is the elevation facing Grove Street. Again, you can see steeply pitched roof, how that extends just a few feet above a low slope roof for the front porch. Same idea with the tall, narrow windows. Here, there are no shutters, just because I think it would be too crowded. And then the final drawing, A8, shows where that roof line begins, means that the ceiling inside the existing bedroom, or sorry, the proposed bedroom would start at about 5 feet, which is about 3 feet lower than typical two-story colonial. So the net effect is that the roof of the house will feel about 3 feet shorter than your average two-story colonial. And just to give that context, if we were looking at the streetscape photos, the three immediate houses on Grove Street and the one across the street, Mount Vernon, you can see are all typical two-story colonials. The exception of 395 Grove, the immediate house immediately adjacent to the backyard is almost a three-story. So we feel that with our eaves starting at 16 feet and these eaves up around 19 or 20, we're significantly scaled back. And with our roof height of about 31 feet, we're no higher than any other house, either to the south or to the north. That's about it.
Any questions from members of the board?
Just one.
Miss.
I just want to confirm, so the extension that you're proposing is not going to encroach on the Grove Street setback any more than it does today? It's within the existing footprint of the building. Is that right?
That is correct. We're building over the existing stud walls.
You're not coming out.
What's that?
It's not coming out.
Correct. It's in line with the existing footprint.
Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. McCullough?
Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarification, because you well, maybe the homeowner started off by describing the property as a ranch, and then you mentioned a center hall colonial, and then you mentioned something about Victorian. So I'm not sure what you're saying to us in terms of what is the final outcome. Is it going to be a ranch? Is it going to be is it going to be colonial? Is it going to be Victorian? What is it that you anticipate?
A two-story colonial with Victorian proportions, which means a
Victorian
steep relief.
proportions. Okay.
A lot of Victorian farmhouses, sometimes the second story is lowered because there's room to do that. And it just breaks down the scale. One of the goals of the Victorians are to eliminate too much siding. And so one way to do that is to bring the roof down and allow dormers to pop out. So you can see on the front elevation, there's, at least above the front porch, there's very little siding. So that's one of the goals of increasing the pitch and then lowering it down. And just gives a more of a bungalow feel to the house and just less overall bulk than your average colonial. So that's why I say it's colonial with those Victorian steeper proportions.
Okay. And that would be consistent with the architecture in the neighborhood, or?
All over Montclair, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah. The neighborhood.
I would say so.
Okay. And then the roof brackets,
Yep.
what's the design? I couldn't quite tell from your drawing, that's what I was wondering.
I think it's probably easier to just show you an example. Wouldn't give you exactly the same bracket, but this is the house on the corner of Claremont Road.
Okay.
We'll mark this A1.
This is a house that I designed 6 or 7 years ago and came up with the same, it's basically the same proportion that I'm proposing for this house. Like that 18-inch deep eave, and then these are decorative brackets that support the end, gable end. They may not pick exactly the same bracket, because I'm sure they want to personalize it, but it's the scale of the bracket that we're proposing.
The driveway, is that by the kitchen? You have a
Directly
stairwell
under.
from the kitchen? So is the driveway, is that where the driveway is, or?
Well, the driveway goes under, the garage is
that's
under
right.
the kitchen.
It's under the house,
Yep,
isn't
you
it?
actually
That's right.
drive under the kitchen.
Now I remember seeing that, okay. So the stairwell from the kitchen would,
It's on the side of the house.
on the side, right?
Yep.
It would alight to where? Like a patio kind of? What is?
Well, currently, you walk out the side,
Yeah.
and it faces the backyard.
Okay, so it
So
leads
there's no
out to the-
change to that.
Okay, I was just wondering, like, where, it seemed pretty steep, and I was kind of wondering, like, where is it going? What's its primary function? Is there, let me look at this again. Was there a railing? Is there a railing to be?
Yeah,
There's an existing railing in this, in the first image in the top left.
Okay,
You can kind of see the side door that exists currently, and there's a railing kind of vaguely visible
Okay.
behind that large bush.
okay,
you can actually see it in Tommy's
on those,
report.
okay,
There's
okay.
that railings there.
I got it, okay. All right, good.
Mr. Church?
Your plans state to relocate the front door. You relocating it how? This way?
Pulling
this-
it a
pulling
foot and a
it out
half
front.
towards the front.
So you're coming
Towards
across
Mount Vernon.
by the porch.
Just to allow for that hall, more room for the door to open into the hall.
Gotcha.
Uh,
How
but
many,
just
how,
leaving enough room to get
how
to the
far are
porch.
you gonna relocate it? How far?
18
forward?
inches.
18, okay. Thank you.
Other questions from members of the board? Mr. Vieira?
Yeah, so the the variance that's requested today, is that an existing condition of the front yard setback in Grove Street?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Other questions from members of the board? Are there any invisible members of the audience or people hiding behind the chairs or something who have any comments, questions, or testimony? The application, this is your time to come forward and speak and say anything you want about the application. Anything either of you wish to add before we discuss and vote on the application?
No?
Okay, we'll start discussion with Ms. Harris.
I'm in favor of this application. I don't think the proposed addition is exasperating an existing condition. It's not making it worse. And I actually think it looks really good, so good luck with this.
Mr. Church?
I'm also in favor of the application. I believe it's an enhancement to that area, and I think it'll look very nice once completed, so I would be in favor of the application.
Mr. Simon?
I'm also in favor. I think it fits nicely with the other houses on the block. Yeah, I'm in favor.
Mr. Vieira?
I'm in favor of the application.
Mr. McCullough?
I support the application.
Mr. Caulfield?
Same here, I support it.
Okay, I'm also in favor of the application, that they're keeping the existing variance condition to the Grove Street frontage. This will clearly look much more in keeping with the other houses, other than your neighbor immediately to the east, which maybe someday will come in, but looks much more like will look much more like a Montclair house than what it does now, and give you a lot more room, and it's certainly not going to be a substantial detriment to the public good or a substantial impairment of the zone plan. Someone want to make a motion?
I would make a motion to accept the application as presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, go, proceed.
Thank you.
Tommy sent the annual report. Just if you can look it over more for the recommendations, if you think we shouldn't be doing any, or that I put in, or modifying any summer carryovers from prior years, and or if there are other things you think we should be adding as recommendations. The governing body has been fairly good about following, not uniformly, but so it's worth your while to look over, and we can discuss it more in depth next month and adopt it and send it on.
Would we be able to request clarification for that R3 garden district in this? Annual report?
I've already spent more time than I wanted to on this, and two, what I really want to see, and my reason, I'm willing to think over the next month about what I think makes sense, and if you could come up with something. But what I really want to see is what the town ends up with Lackawanna Plaza, because that at least potentially colors my view as to what density is appropriate here. And since we currently have 3 different densities, and depending upon the housing type someone's building, my view as to which of those is most appropriate, because I've never actually seen a zone with 3 different densities. I've seen, I've seen overlays with a different density, but this is, if you're building this, we like this density, and not immediately making sense of the distinctions. But if you want to come up with something, my immediate thought is I have different views depending upon what they're doing in Lackawanna Plaza, which is virtually adjacent to this.
Right.
And
Okay.
but, if you have thoughts, and maybe we can come up with something, but
Now,
maybe.
our recommendations will go through you to the,
Oh, the board will vote on it, and then it gets passed on to the governing body, and they sometimes decide to do something with them.
So if anyone has recommendations, you can send them to me. I can work them into the draft report that we can then discuss in April.
Can I just ask one question? Number 4, does this relate to, there was an application that we had, I think, it might have been last year. They were adding a pool house, and it was a very, it was less than an inch away from the principal structure, and they tried to say that it was not part of the
Yeah, they say
principal.
it wasn't attached.
Right, it wasn't
Like,
attached.
Yeah,
Does
and
this
I don't-
address
I
that
don't-
issue?
The second part of this, they made that change as what's there. I'm
They
not
didn't-
sure where the second part,
So I added that one in discussions I'd had with the zoning officer, because the way that it's written now, if I remember correctly, is it only has that requirement for principal structure, but not accessory structure to accessory structure. So there was a case where somebody they hadn't actually applied for it, but they had discussed with us putting some accessory structure really close to an attached garage less than 4 feet. And we looked at this provision and it doesn't cover a situation like that.
Got it,
So-
okay. So this provision is saying that if you've got anything within 4 feet of your house, that's considered part of your house.
Right, and then we're recommending adding that language also for accessory structures.
Got it.
So if you have two
let me-
accessory
Let me make
structures.
sure I'm so they amended it at our request after we had the pool structure, so the first accessory structure, and someone came in and said, okay, but we'll put a second accessory structure that can then just have the accessory, even though if you looked at it visually, other than a technical separation, it was one big main structure.
Essentially, in the case I'm thinking of, it was a detached garage and they wanted to put another shed or something, but very close to it. And this provision only applies if it's close to the principal structure, not because you can have two accessory structures. So it's just to prevent the same type of situation, but with two accessory structures.
Any other discussions?
I would like to ask a question, but after we have adjourned the meeting. Because I think we're still being recorded, are we not? Yes. Yes.
Should you have said that on the record?
That's fine. It adds intrigue. More people might tune in to our meeting next month.
If there's no further discussion, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and then